Today, I'm going to teach you how to play the Pokemon trading card game in the most simple way. But if you stick around and follow the channel for more content over time, you'll see more advanced deck building, deck tips, techniques, gameplay mechanics, and maybe you one day can become a world champion yourself. Pokemon trading card game is sort of like the question Morpheus asked Neo in The Matrix.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You take the blue pill and stay at home and play with your family and friends. Or you take the red pill, wake up, and go to the World Championships. Let's start with the basics on how to play the Pokemon trading card game. First of all, you and an opponent will both need a deck comprised of 60 cards. Each deck has to at least have one basic Pokemon, but other than that, you can kind of build them however you want. Or if you just have something like a theme deck, a league battle deck, you can just play with that as is, and it's probably going to be a lot better for someone to be new. Basically, the game goes back and forth with players attacking each other, doing damage to each other's Pokemon until they're either knocked out completely or all prize cards are taken. Basically, you can win the game by knocking out 6 Pokemon and taking 6 prize cards, or if your opponent doesn't have any more Pokemon in play, you also win the game that way. Sometimes some Pokemon are worth more than one prize card though, but we'll get to that in a little bit here. Let's look at the different types of cards. So you have Pokemon, trainers, and energy. For Pokemon cards, they all have a stage. If they're a basic, stage 1, or a stage 2, or sometimes they can be something like a VMAX or a V-Star. The name of the Pokemon, and you're allowed to play up to 4 cards of the same name in a deck. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you could play, example, 4 different Charizards at 4 copies apiece. You may play 4 Charizard cards in your deck. Now, if it has V or V-Star or VMAX in the name, it's counted as a different name of a card. So you can technically play 4 Charizard, 4 Charizard V, 4 Charizard V-Star, and 4 Charizard VMAX if you so desire to do so. Next, we'll take a look at the HP, the hit points here. That's how much life or health your Pokemon has before it can be knocked out. When you are attacked or you do attack your opponent, you place damage counters on those Pokemon to signal basically how much damage it's taken. And up here we have the type. This is very important because it matters for a lot of things like weakness and resistance, but we'll get to that in a little bit here. There are multiple different types of Pokemon. You've got water, lightning, fire, fighting, grass, psychic, dark, dragon, and then, in the expanded format, you also have fairy. If you're just going to focus on the standard format, you won't really have to worry about that one too much. All right, let's look at abilities. Now, not every Pokemon has an ability, but sometimes these are really awesome, and sometimes they can break the rules of the game and let you do things that you really shouldn't be able to do in a normal situation. For example, we'll look at Zacian V from Sword and Shield. Zacian V, Intrepid Sword, allows you to pick up the top 3 cards of your deck. If there are any metal energy there, you can attach them to that Pokemon, and if they're not, you can put them in your hand. Anyway, though, if you do use this ability, it ends your turn, so you do have to be very attentive to what abilities you use and where and when. It really just depends on the cards that you have access to and what you have in your deck. So now we'll take a look at your attacks. Some attacks are as simple as being free with this shaded symbol here on these Hisuian Pokemon, or they are absolutely insane, needing up to 5 energy cards. You need to have energy cards attached to your Pokemon to be able to use these attacks. So, for example, we'll look at Venusaur here, and it's got Solar Beam. It takes 2 grass and 2 colorless energy, so you need at least 2 grass energy cards attached to Venusaur here to use Solar Beam, and 2 additional energy of any type. Now, there are other things like special energy or abilities that can also double that, but it really just depends, again, what sort of cards you have access to and the whole overall strategy of the deck you're trying to play. Now I'll take a look at weakness. Weakness is basically a ×2 damage booster onto a different kind of Pokemon. Every type has a few different weaknesses that it has. We'll take a look at, say, for example, Palkia. You have all these Pokemon with lightning weakness, and then you have some cards like Ice Rider Calyrex, where it's also a water type, but it's weak to metal instead. Resistance is something that is a damage decreaser from attacks based off of types as well. So if we look here at Mew V here, is resistant to fighting. So say, for example, if your opponent's Urshifu attacks into Mew, your Mew's going to take 30 less damage from Urshifu's attacks. Alright, retreat costs. Now, sometimes Pokemon have no retreat costs, so they can switch to the bench for free, or sometimes it's insane and all the way up to 4. There are cards that can reduce this, and you are only allowed to manually retreat once per turn unless you have some sort of switch effect. So always keep that in mind with your retreat costs. You do have to discard energy cards from that Pokemon to fulfill that requirement. Let's take a moment now and look at rule boxes. Some Pokemon cards have rule blocks. A majority of the ones you're going to find in more recent history with cards that are legal in the standard format is the V rule. Basically, when your Pokemon V is knocked out, your opponent takes 2 prize cards. Another example would be Radiant Pokemon here, just like this Radiant Greninja. It basically just says that you can only play 1 Radiant Pokemon in your deck. You can't play multiple copies of Radiant Greninja, and you can't play other Radiant Pokemon, say for example like Radiant Charizard. You can't have them in the same deck together. Alright, now we're going to take a look at trainer cards. There are different types of trainers. Items, supporters, stadiums, full cards. You're allowed to play up to 4 copies of each card in your deck. And you can play as many trainer cards as you like, with some stipulations. You may only play 1 stadium card per turn and 1 supporter card per turn. You are allowed to play as many items and tool cards as you'd like, though. You can only play a stadium card in play if there is one that does not share the same name. Stadium cards are basically permanent cards that sit between your active Pokemon and theirs off to the side, and it has effects that either apply mostly to you or sometimes for both players to use. Supporter cards you can only play once per turn, and they have insane effects. For example, Professor's Research. Discard your hand and draw 7 new cards. Marnie, shuffle your hand, put on the bottom of the deck. You get 5 cards. Your opponent does the same thing, but they get 4. Or something as crazy as Boss's Orders, where you're able to make one of your opponent's benched Pokemon up to the active, and then that way you can take a cheeky knockout on it. Item cards you can play as many as you have in your hand during your turn. A lot of them are going to help you find Pokemon or energy cards, or just, have some sort of switch effect so you don't have to pay a retreat cost. Tool cards are basically attached cards to your Pokemon. So you can slap this onto your Pokemon and give it a little bit of a buff. Look at Big Charm here for an example. It's going to give that Pokemon 30 more hit points. When looking at trainer cards, the type of card will be up on the top right, and on the bottom right, it'll tell you a little bit on how to play the card. Sometimes you can find trainer cards that also have a rule box. It doesn't happen too often in the current format, but in the past, we've had tons of cards like these Prisms or these A-Specs here that have rule boxes that you have to pay attention to as well when it comes to deck construction. So the information on the bottom of every card basically tells you what set it's from, the regulation mark, and the number of the card in this set and how many cards are in that set. Alright, now let's take a look at energy cards. For the term basic energy, this just means energy that doesn't have a special name on its card whatsoever. So for example, fire, water, lightning, grass, fighting, etc., etc. You're allowed to play as many of these as you want in your deck. So if you want as little as 1, you can play 1, or if you would like, you can play 59 as long as you've got a basic Pokemon. You're only allowed to play 1 energy card per turn, and you attach them to your Pokemon, sort of like how you would with the tool cards that we talked about on the trainers. Now, when it comes to special energy, they have a name as well, and just like anything else with a name, you're only allowed to play 4 copies of that card in your deck. So for example, we'll take a look at Rapid Strike Energy, and this can be attached only to a Rapid Strike Pokemon. That is a classification on a card, and you'll see that across Pokemon and trainers and energy in this situation. Sometimes special energy can break the rules. For example, Aurora Energy can be treated as any type of energy. So if you have a Pokemon like Rayquaza here, who has lightning and fire in its attack cost, this can apply to be either of them, but not both at the same time. In recent history, the Pokemon Company has made awesome products like these League Battle Decks, Trainer's Toolkit, and these collection boxes that have awesome Pokemon and energy and trainer cards featured here. For example, if you really wanted to, you could take either one of these League Battle Decks featuring Ice Rider or Shadow Rider Calyrex and get something like a Trainer's Toolkit, and you're actually pretty much good to go, even at a competitive level. If you need examples on other deck lists, head on over to my channel. I have a playlist full of deck lists for the current standard format of the Pokemon trading card game. Alright, now let's look at the playing field. Every card has a specific location that it needs to be in for the most part. You've got your active Pokemon, which is the Pokemon that you're attacking with, or, this is the one you start the game with. You got your bench where you can have up to 5 more Pokemon sitting there in reserves, and you can also use their abilities or attach energy cards to them. And sometimes there are cards out there that break the rules and allow you to have more than 5 Pokemon on your bench. Here's where the deck belongs, and of course this is where all 60 of your cards are going to be at the start of the game. This here is the discard pile, where any cards that are used and abused, like your trainer cards or any Pokemon that are knocked out, can go here. Over here on the left is where your prize cards will be. This is where after you set up your active Pokemon, you'll put the next 6 cards face down onto this side. Here you can place your stadium card, and then in the future, the Lost Zone will technically go above your prize cards. Let's take a look at starting a game. First thing you're going to do is flip a coin and have your opponent call the outcome. Whoever gets it right gets to choose who goes first or second. So you're going to shuffle up your deck, place it face down, and draw 7 cards. From there, you're going to look in your hand and try and find a basic Pokemon. And if you do, you can set it face down in the active spot. If neither player finds a basic Pokemon, that's called a mulligan. You shuffle up and keep tally of how many times this happens, and your opponent will be able to draw an extra card if you do so. Once both players have a basic Pokemon, then you're going to take the next couple cards, 6 specifically, and put them over on the left side, face down. Those are your prize cards. When you knock out a Pokemon, you take a prize card. You take all 6 of your prize cards, you win. Now, there are other ways, of course, to win the game, though. During your turn, you can do any of the following things. Put a basic Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, evolve your Pokemon, attach energy cards, play trainer cards, and some things you can do only once per turn, like play a supporter, retreat your active Pokemon, attach an energy, and play a stadium card. You can also use abilities as you like, as long as it doesn't say that you can only do it once per turn or more. Please be careful with that kind of thing. The last thing you can do is an attack. Once you attack and resolve all the damage and effects, it's now your opponent's turn, and they'll be able to do the same things you just did. But that'll do it for me. I'll see y'all in the next one. Take it easy. Much love. Peace out.